So somewhere along this section of road here, there was a store, and this store was almost definitely sort of the center of Confederate activity. So even though there's, over 10,000 Union soldiers camped around, a number of Poolesvillians found their way into the Confederate Army. Well, the guy operating the store roughly on this spot is arrested for recruiting Confederates. So the thought is that he would reach out to known Southern men and make arrangements for them, quite possibly in his store, to head across the river under a guide and get across and sign up, probably with Elijah White's command. He was arrested, then he was acquitted and told to go back home, and then he was rearrested and he was sent to Old Capitol Prison in D.C., where a lot of the political prisoners were sent, and he would have been in the same prison as Rose Grinnell, who was also born in Poolesville. So White knew what was going on all the time, and we were over at the sort of the headquarters building, the old school. That was actually the site of the November 1862 raid. George Chiswell of Poolesville had, prior to the war in 1859, when John Brown raided Harper's Ferry in late 1859, they had organized a militia company in Poolesville. Now, the guy who was in charge of the militia company was a Unionist, though many of the members who joined the militia were Confederates. Chiswell and a number of Southern-leaning citizens decided to form their own unit because they were afraid that their interest would not be protected by the militia. So that is what happened. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 Poolesvillians fought in the Confederate Army, probably close to the same number in the Union Army. So if you're looking at white soldiers, it was probably somewhere in the 50 to 60 category for the Confederates and somewhere in the 20 to 25 category for the Union soldiers. But my sources on that one is weak. There were a number of African Americans from Poolesville who lived in Poolesville who joined what were called U.S. colored troops. Now, the problem is also it can be kind of hard to figure out who exactly was from Poolesville, because what happens is slavery is declared early in the war. Slavery is killed in the Capitol. And in fact, the slave owners, the federal government paid the slave owners money. So you have slaves from Northern Virginia and throughout Maryland who in essence run away to D.C. for various and sundry reasons, probably related to the fact that they felt safe with Union soldiers in Poolesville. They set up a camp, what will become known as a Freedmen's area, around where the Rosenwald School is and where the Jerusalem Baptist Church is. And a number of individuals who were passing through, once they began to allow African Americans to fight, would have signed up in Jerusalem, even though they may or may not have been from Poolesville, actually. So it's harder to get a fix on the numbers there. So yeah, I think I've wrapped up my Civil War tour, other than to say, and if I've told you this before, forgive me, I'm getting old. The November 1862 raid, I don't think I did, it was Captain Chiswell. So he goes south and joins Elijah White's unit, which becomes officially known as the 35th Virginia Battalion. Unofficially, it's better known as either White's Rangers or the Comanches, and it's going to turn out to be one of the more effective Confederate units in the Army. and they're going to be involved in a lot of very important battles and operations at places like Brandy Station, Gettysburg, and elsewhere. Well, Chiswell took about 40 guys from his company, almost all of them from the Poolesville, Billsville, Barnesville area. And in November, he sneaks across the river and he surrounds the old schoolhouse, and he takes most of them prisoners, including the 2 telegraph operators and their equipment. So that was the November raid. The December raid starts out at the Presbyterian Church and then ends at the old schoolhouse. And most of the Union garrison in December actually end up surrendering. Those are like the only 2 raids we're aware of. Undoubtedly, members of Chiswell's company would have crossed the river to gather information. And just so you understand, when large numbers of troops were stationed here, they were all around. The field in front of the new town hall over there was there was a Union regiment camp there. So between really June of 1861 and March of 1862, and then again in June of 1863, there are going to be very large numbers of Union troops in Poolesville. The rest of the time, there's usually 500 or 600 soldiers here, so it's not like there's not any. All right, guys, that's it for our Civil War trips here. It's a lot of talking and videoing. I'll try and stop and show you where the main line went very briefly during the September 8th battle, but other than that, we're done.